Good afternoon, everyone. You already know who I am, but for those that don't, my name is Jean-Pierre Bryce. I'm the owner and operator of cmpradio.net. And today we're doing a podcast called the Cultivating Mature Positivity Podcast. Now, my guest for today is the city receiver, Vijay Kapoor, newly elected, newly appointed, right, city receiver, Vijay Kapoor. And I want to talk to him a little bit about, what a receiver does, what a receiver is, how he views the city of Chester, and also, what does he want to see happen to the city of Chester? So, Vijay, how are you doing today? Welcome.
JP, I am doing great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. As I told you a little bit earlier, this is my first real official interview since becoming the receiver on July 1st. So I very much appreciate it and very much looking forward to it.
Oh man, listen, I thank you for reaching out. I thank you for coming through, showing up on time, right? Having a little powwow before the interview got started. I want you to know, first of all, how I appreciate your position, right? And a lot of people might take this the wrong way, right? And so what if you do, right? The receiver, what I believe, right? The receiver is here to make sure the funds are accounted for and help the city moving forward, right? I've always said this. Since Jack McCrelly was the mayor of the city of Chester, Chester has been ran poorly. Chester has been ran to benefit those who are in power and not those who need resources, help. We were talking earlier, you were talking about the people that are doing jobs that are not theirs, right? Because we don't have enough people to do the jobs. When I say Chester, come together. When I say Chester, we need us. When I say Chester, we need to build this together. I'm not lying, because if you don't know, you won't grow. If you can't grow, you won't know. So I like to thank you for stopping through, having this conversation. First question off the bat, right? What is a receiver? What is your job? And how good are you at your job?
Well, how good I am is really more of a question about how good we are. I got a great team behind me. We're working very, very closely with city staff, and jury's still out, right? We're starting. We're building on a great legacy that the former receiver Michael Dowry has put together, and we're working really hard with city staff and our focus is really on the city operations, right, and improving the lives of Chester residents. So, the concept of a receiver, when you think about a receiver, just more generally, usually when you think about a receiver, is a receiver who usually comes in when a business or a community is bankrupt, and they come in and they cut. It's usually what you think about when they come in a receiver. They'll come in and cut a bunch of contracts and lay off a bunch of people. Again, you saw you didn't have a receiver in Prospect Crozier, but you saw kind of what happened there. Right. We are taking a very, very different approach here in Chester. Under the law that I was appointed under, which is Act 47. What a receiver's job is to do is to help provide and ensure that the community receives something called vital and necessary services.
Okay.
And so our take on this is not only do we have to make sure that the city has the money to do that, but that's only part of it, right? The other part of it is making sure that the services are actually provided. And that means improving operations. And oftentimes that means investing back into the city. It's not an easy thing to do. But what I see my job as the receiver is essentially trying to help the city get back on its feet, to provide the vital and necessary services, not just in the short term, but to make sure we have a plan to do it in the long term, but also to do it in a way that's in the best interest of the residents, right? We want to do right by residents, because you can come up and you can create a bunch of new ideas and a bunch of new revenues, but you can do it in ways that actually harm the community, right? And that's something that we want to avoid. And in Chester's situation, I will tell you, there's other communities out there that have been in financial distress, that have faced similar problems to Chester. But as someone who comes from this world, I will tell you, Chester by far is a community that has had all of those issues and then more. We're working very hard to improve that. It's important, I think, for the community to know just how, where we're starting from, where our baseline is, right? And JP, feel free to stop me if I'm going on.
No.
But you raised a really interesting point that I wanna touch on, and Mayor Roots raised it at the last council meeting, and I think it's important for the community to know. What is different in Chester than in most other communities is that city services are often doing the jobs that they wouldn't have to do in other communities. And what I mean by that is, in this community, right, there's a lot of abandoned properties. These are properties that people, aren't keeping up with, right? Our public works department goes and cuts the weeds, right? Our codes department has to go out there and cite them. We've got abandoned vehicles throughout the city, right? I was just mentioning to you, I think there's one around the corner for you.
With grass all on it, right?
Exactly, right. And so these are things that like other communities don't have to face, right? You've got people coming in here and illegally dumping, garbage throughout the city, right? And our public works department has to go out and clean it, right? And oftentimes it's the same place over and over again. So, these are challenges that I think city staff is rising to the challenge of. But from the perspective of the community, it's not easy, right? But again, I think we're seeing some progress there, and I'm really excited about it. I really am.
Absolutely, I am too. Right. In your assessment, when did the city's financial troubles truly begin?
So there's a couple of different ways of looking at this, right? And I know the reason you're asking this question isn't to assign blame, right?
No,
it's to
not.
talk about it, right? Because only
right?
Only if we understand how the city got here can we figure out how to get it out, right? And not go back in once we get it out. So there's no question that the industrial base, leaving the city was a big problem, right? The waterfront used to be full of factories. Now, interestingly, as you noted before, a lot of those jobs were controlled politically, right? Over the years, right? It's fascinating histories about Chester, and again, I'm not from Chester, excuse me, but I've had a chance to read and learn about it. So no question that was an issue, right? That happened there. But, that's happened in other communities as well, right? They've lost their industrial base. I think the other thing that happened here in Chester, and I'll compare it to other cities that were in Act 47, maybe for not as long, is in many of those other communities, when there was a plan, an Act 47 plan, it was actually followed, right? You didn't necessarily see that in Chester.
Right.
And what I mean by that is you had, labor contracts that were not, that either didn't adhere to the plan or were more lucrative than what the city could afford. Okay. You had, pension calculations that again, at one point had been changed. And if you'd stuck to it, you probably would have been all right. But, in backroom meetings, they changed them. Right. And you also, I think, ended up too with this perspective, and like you touched on it, right, in the 1970s and before, there was, I think, this feeling. And again, I'm going to be honest with people over here. I'm going to give you honest answers on this.
Protect yourself.
Is I think in Chester, and it's happened in other communities as well, is I think it was seen as the government was a way of increasing your wealth.
Control. Right.
Yeah, control, increasing your wealth. It was how you got ahead, right? Because as the industrial base went away, where were you able to do?
Where were the jobs?
Right. And I think what again you ended up seeing here then is that kind of view of government existed for the people in power as opposed to government existing for the people at large.
Right.
And you see that in terms of people being hired. You see that in terms of just even the structure of government, where Chester's very different under its government structure, right? Council members were actually permitted to be department heads, and that allows all kinds of people to hire family members and otherwise, right? It's a patronage situation. And so you see that kind of throughout Chester's history. And so, I think, again, you start with the industrial base. I think it happened in the 70s as well. You can look at the consolidation of power here. Yeah. And it continued. You can look at the budgets. You can look at the pension funds. But what really ended up happening in 2020, and it wasn't just because of COVID, it was because of the city's financial condition. The city just ran out of time. You couldn't keep doing it anymore. The city couldn't afford to do that anymore. And just to remind people at that time, the city situation was so bad that it was literally on the cusp of running out of money. Like, it was about to run out of money. The city was not going to be able to make payroll. The police pension fund was going to run out of money. Like, instead of getting pension checks, the retirees were going to be getting IOUs. Our public works department had basically 2 full-time people in it, to take care of all the grass and all the streets in the city. Like, you couldn't do that. But that was the financial condition of where Chester was. So it's a long story. But what I also want to be clear about is we're seeing improvements over here, and there is a way forward here. There is absolutely and completely a way forward. Some of it's going to have to do with investment from the outside, but some of it is just about making government run for the people, being transparent. One of the things, and again, feel free to cut me off if you want to ask a question. I think one of the most important things we did, the receiver Dowry did when he came in, was there wasn't a camera in City Hall to cover council meetings. Right. And you didn't actually have to put all the resolutions on the agenda. Right. All you had to do was have the agenda. And what the receiver did was basically say, look, we're going to put a camera over here. We're going to Facebook Live the city council meetings, right? And folks watched it, right? And we're going to require that the agendas for council meetings be posted the week before, and that everyone can read the resolutions before they're put in front of council. And that type of transparent, just that basic stuff. And it's not just in Chester. I mean, this happened throughout Delaware County. Yes, let's be clear over here. Like, I'm not just picking on Chester over here, but this happened throughout Delaware County. Yep. And folks who are from Chester know about that. Folks who are watching this should read about that.
So the radio station, when we first opened up, I think it was Tim Hudson. He had suggested that we go into City Hall and go live from the radio station, right? And I went over there. I met with a few people, but again, like I said, if the message is transparency and accountability, if a person isn't trying to be transparent or they're not trying to be accountable to their people, they're going to have a problem with you coming in there and doing that. So they had a problem with paying. And I wasn't asking for a lot of money. You feel me? $100 per joint. You feel me? It's always $100 an hour. But they had an issue and it didn't go through, and then we invited him through for an interview, right? And then that went left, right? So I get what happens. I get why people, and I just want people to understand, like, it wasn't just his behavior when the receiver got here was completely crazy, right? And I understand why, because he watched other people do things and have fun in the treasury. It's like you see the king and he's playing with all the money and he's playing in the field and he's having fun, and then you want to be the king because you want to do all those things, but those things don't benefit the community, right? So when we got to asking questions and the answers that we were receiving weren't right, then we started seeing how he treated, like Mike Dowry did one interview with me, right, and then got kicked out of the building, right? So it was like, oh man, like, how can we?
I remember that.
Right?
We actually had to move all of our stuff out over a weekend.
Over the weekend, right? And
I remember that.
It's like, why can't we just talk about what's happening in our communities to get solutions? And information is how you get solutions. So you need more information out here. You need more people talking, and then you can get solutions. So when you think about the key decisions or deals that push Chester into bankruptcy, what two pop up the most for you?
So to answer your question directly, so what probably put Chester most in there? One is the pension, managing the pensions, right? Without question, and retiree healthcare, both of them. So retiree benefits is the city had retiree benefits that there was no way it was ever going to be able to afford. It just wasn't. And I do work across the state. I look at other cities' pensions and other cities' retiree health care plans. None are as rich as Chester. Chester's plans are more lucrative by far. I mean, they really, really are, especially on the retiree health care end. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is not focusing on the operations of the city, right? Of basically saying, look, we're going to hire people. And I mean, and again, I mean, no disrespect to the folks, and I'm certainly not talking about the folks in City Hall now. I'm not trying to point fingers before, but the reality was a lot of the folks when we got there in City Hall were not qualified for their jobs. They just weren't, right? And that's not us trying to come in and take over power, right? Because I understand jobs are power.
Right.
You know, in a community like this, and we weren't trying to be disrespectful to people, but you have to get the work done. And in a situation like that, right? If you have a city where it's viewed as you get a job because you know an individual, and you're not, what kind of people are you going to recruit, right? If you're somebody who's really good at your job, you know, and Chester's a hard place to work. It's a very, very hard place to work, right? The tasks you got to do are much harder over here. You talk to, again, I'll use our public works department. When they're cutting grass, you know, they're doing it on substandard equipment. They've got a lot of work to do. There's usually trash. They don't know what they're going to find in the grass. You know, it's very, very hard to attract people to work in a community. Plus one, like, that can't pay you a lot, right? Because you've got financial issues. So I think both of those things for me is what ended up in bankruptcy. But the reason, if I could just riff real quick on bankruptcy, why I think it's important. One of the things you and I were talking about before here was just how difficult it was. Like when I was sitting and I've been here for almost a little over 5 years. So I came in as Mike Dowery's chief of staff back in April of 2020. That's when we came in. And what's really cool about this too, I just want to mention as well, is the team that we have here on the receivers team has stayed together throughout that entire period. So you kind of contrast that with the school district's receivership, where they've had a lot of receivers turn over, you know, really fast. Like we've actually been able to have this group that's been able to, you know, that's been able to stay together. And so, you know, that group, again, what we've been able to do is, I think, again, focus on the operations of the city, focus on trying to improve those sorts of things. And with the bankruptcy, because people really didn't want to deal with us in Chester. They didn't, right? It's like, Chester, it's someone else's problem. You know, I was talking to you about how hard it was to get media coverage. Right. And this, very few cities go bankrupt across the country. This is the only second community in Pennsylvania to ever go bankrupt. It is the second community in Pennsylvania to have a receiver. What bankruptcy though allows you to do, that process, is it allows you to pull everybody together, because all of a sudden now they have something to lose, and now they have to talk to you. Right. Before bankruptcy, they can just push you off, right, and just wait you out. It's kind of what the Water Authority is doing right now with their litigation strategy. They're just kind of filing things. And that hurts Chester, right? Because we don't have all the time in the world, nor do we have all the money in the world. But in terms of the bankruptcy process, it's forcing everybody to come together, and it's forcing everybody to talk. And that process it's slow, it's expensive, but I don't think without that, I don't think Chester would have had a chance without that process. I really, really mean that.
And you're talking about renegotiation.
Yep.
Right? Past agreements.
Yep.
Is that possible under receivership to renegotiate the pension, right?
Yes.
To go in and renegotiate the pension?
Well, under bankruptcy it is. So under receivership, you know, we can have conversations about it, but it's under Pennsylvania law to change. It's very, very hard to change already existing pension benefits and already existing retiree benefits. Right. And so that is something that you have to do in bankruptcy. What's interesting about the retiree benefits too is so when we filed for bankruptcy, we had to give notice to all the retirees. We had to give notice to all, they're called creditors, anyone who's either owed money or something like that. And what was fascinating was for the police and fire retirees, the overwhelming number do not live in Chester. You know, so they worked in Chester, right? But they no longer live in Chester, right? And you don't see that with the Teamsters or the non-union folks. Right. Most of those folks still are in Chester. Right. But it's really interesting, right? Because you're going to have these conversations with the retirees, right, who are represented by a committee, and you know, if you're sitting in their shoes, right, and again, I'm not going to be disrespectful to them. Like, they might not care as much about what goes on in the city operations if they're not living in the city.
Absolutely.
Right. And so a lot of this is about really trying to get everybody around the table, and really we got to, as a receiver, I've got to be able to be fair to everybody. I got to balance everybody's interests. But as the receiver, we are also looking out very closely for the residents and to be being their voice as well.
The Chester Water Authority has been under threat of sale for years, right? Let's say probably 6 years, right?
Yeah, probably 6 to 8.
Reportedly started during Thaddeus Kirkland's administration. What's the latest with that?
So latest with that is we are so there's a big. Let me answer your question. Let me give you a little bit of background on it. So the latest with this right now is that. There is a case in front of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court about who owns the Chester Water Authority. Okay. And this stems from the change in the board structure that was done by legislation, that was done in the middle of the night, that was really, in my opinion, slipped through. There's no other way to explain kind of that situation. But it changed the board of governance from all of Chester appointees, right, so all of city council, to 3 from the city of Chester, 3 from Chester County, and 3 from Delaware County. So that was done, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in 2012. Also, when the power structure changed, right? A new party came in, right? It was fine for decades, right? It was fine since the 1920s. It was fine if Chester could appoint all those board members, but man, like all of a sudden it changed. It
was the easiest and the best place to steal money. And the easiest and the best place to hide money, right? Why would anybody look for money if they don't have anything? If we're stealing it from them, why would they look? Anyway, go ahead.
Well, no, but in the water, and this is what's important for residents, right? Chester residents. And again, I'm not trying to dredge up a bunch of the past, but I think it's important for people to know this, right? And this is certainly like again, I'll take a step back and say, I've worked in a lot of communities. Like I do this for a living, right? I'm a professional in this area. I'm a lawyer. I've seen a lot of communities. I've worked in different states, but I have never seen a community taken advantage of as much as I have the city of Chester.
Come on, man.
And I mean that. No, I mean that, right?
No, I know you mean it.
It is like if you read the history, like you can't, if I had $1 for every time I meet with somebody and tell them, they're like, wait, that happened?
Yeah.
This is the worst I've ever seen it by far. Yes, it is. And what happened with that, and you can go back and look at the legislation, right? And we did a whole MFRAC about it. Folks who follow this know that every we do it twice a month. We have a televised on Facebook Live where we'll go and do presentations and a committee meets. And I don't have the dates, but I can provide them to you.
Yeah, provide them.
But we went back and we actually looked at the legislation that changed the that changed the governance structure of the Chester Water Authority. And what you saw over there was it was specifically written in a way that it only applied to the Chester Water Authority. Right. So under the Municipal Authorities Act, you have a single municipal authority and you got a joint municipal authority. Single means you got one community, you set it up. That's what the Water Authority is. Chester set it up years ago. You're the only one who appoints it. Or you get a joint where 2 or more do it. And then they figure out their numbers, right? Based on that. But they have this third group. And it's about a paragraph long in terms of how it's defined, and it's defined as an entity that has assets in more than 2 counties and provides water services to a certain number of people. And it's like if you look at it, it is clearly intended only to apply to the Chester Water Authority. So yet again, only the city of Chester. Every other community. Any other community in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania would not be in the situation that Chester's in. It's only the city of Chester that we have this case going on in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So the governance structure was changed, right? And by the way, Chester does have appointees to that governance structure. But where it is right now is it's in front of the state Supreme Court about who actually owns the water system. So did that change in the governance also change the city's ability to take back the assets? It's a long statutory argument, but we expect a decision either towards the end of probably early next year, right? And it's going to take a while, right? And I foresee a lot of litigation there. But I want to be clear about the receiver's position, right? And this was Receiver Dowry's and my position, is we are in the process right now of trying to monetize the asset, right? We are trying to get money for the city of Chester. Because by the way, when that board was taken away from Chester, Chester didn't get a dime. So it wasn't just that it was taken away, right? And this is Chester County too. Chester County is one of the wealthiest counties in Pennsylvania, right? One of the wealthiest counties, right? And they've got this, they're arguing that they've got this asset right now that they didn't pay the city of Chester a dime for.
Nothing.
A dime, right? So to be very clear here is Michael, when he was a receiver, and me as I'm a receiver, we are requiring that the asset remain publicly owned.
Right.
Because we understand the issues with privatization. Right. Privatization means selling it to a private company, and they'll raise rates. They've got profit motives, a publicly owned entity does not. And so we're very clear about that. Now, the retirees are a little upset about that. They've sued me because they want privatization to be a possibility. They sued me in bankruptcy court, and that's okay. I understand why. They want to get as much money as they possibly can.
Who wants to get as much money? The people that have invested into, explain.
No. So the retirees. So the people who are getting the pensions and the retiree health care, right? Because they want as much money as they can because they're afraid of cuts. Right. That's what they're afraid of.
Okay.
But that's the same kind of issue, right? I told you that most of those retirees don't live in the city. Right. So we've got concerns about that. Right. And just with the water as well, JP, it's not just the Chester Water Authority, it's also the Stormwater Authority, and it's also what's called the reversionary interest of Delcora. So this is, just to explain about that, is Delcora was created back in the 1970s.
Yes.
Okay, so everyone had their own little municipal sewer system.
Right.
And what happened is when they got put together, they have these agreements, right? And what the agreement says is that in the event Delcora ceases to operate, all the municipalities get their assets back, right? And that's what happened with Delcora, right? Because again, as things changed up in Delaware County Council, right, as a new party was coming in, the old party on the way out, basically, quote unquote, sold the asset. They sold Delcora to a private entity, right? Now that's in litigation right now, but what the reversionary interest, what that means is that basically means all of Chester's, we're taking the position that it's all of Delcora's assets in Chester that would come back to the city. So again, all of that we're requiring to remain publicly owned, but it's really important for people to understand Chester needs a lot of money coming in.
Yes.
Its tax base can't support the operations.
Yes.
And so, as part of what I talked about earlier, this is a way to help address some of the pension issues, but it's more importantly a way to invest into the city, because again, this is a community that has a lot of needs. It's very, and it's something that long term we care deeply about, and we care about the quality of life of this. I tell people. People again, because who view the receiver as just a financial guy, right? Because you're exactly right. I am a guy who's looking at the money coming in, and the cash register going out. I'm absolutely sure about that. But I also want to make sure that the money's being spent well. Because people don't live in a community just because you have a balanced budget, right? You live in a community that gives you good services, right? You live in a community that takes care of people, and that's something that again we're doing differently than a lot of other communities in bankruptcy. It's why it's taken the process so long. I talk to people, they're like, why is this taking so long? And I'm like, part of it's because we're in litigation with a bunch of parties that are pretty mad at us right now. And we got a great team right now that actually knows what's up, right? We have one of the best law firms in the state on our side, Ballard Spard. They represent the Phillies, right? We have one of the best municipal finance groups, our financial advisors, public financial management. Gordon Mann does this throughout the state. They were the ones who helped Pittsburgh get out of Act 47. We got an incredibly strong.
So Pittsburgh is the other county, the other place that was in Act 47?
No, well, they were in Act 47. Harrisburg was a city that was in receivership.
Okay.
But Pittsburgh was in Act 47. Same kind of thing. Didn't get the receivership. But PFM helped them out. We got a great law firm called Campbell Durant. They're one of the best labor law firms in the state. And so, and we got other really great members of this. I've heard a lot about hey, how much are you spending? How much has the state spent on this? And what I'll say to the community here is we're transparent about what people are being paid. Our contracts are online. Not everybody's contracts are online, by the way, looking at UCWA, right? Not all of those are online. right? Like, we know what our attorneys are getting paid.
Right.
You know, nobody knows what your attorneys are getting paid, and you seem to keep hiring them. But I mean that they are, right? But that's the issue of transparency, right? And what I mean, but ultimately, JP, and look, I'm not here just throwing shots over here, but
no storms.
But
I got your back.
but what I want for the community to know is you have one of the absolute strongest teams. I think the best team in the state on your side.
Right.
Like you finally have a fighting chance right now.
Chance.
And yes, does it cost money? It does. But I'm going to tell you this. Every one of those groups is doing this work at a reduced rate. And the benefit of all this is that the Commonwealth, the state, is paying for it.
Absolutely.
Not the city. The state is. So, I appreciate you letting me go on that for a little
no,
bit.
no, you're good.
But I think that is something I think it's really important for the community to know.
So we also have to we have a stormwater authority question. So
okay.
The stormwater authority reportedly has council members on its boards that should not be there.
Well, they did.
They did.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
How does that, or how did that impact governance and finances, and should they be required to give the money back?
Okay, so good questions on here across the board. So let me start with a little bit of background, and JP, I'm going to answer your questions. So stormwater is an issue in Chester. It just is, right? There's flooding around the city. There's no question about that. The way stormwater works in Pennsylvania is you have to get a permit from the state in order to discharge water into streams. So Chester has to get a stormwater permit. In order to do that, you've got to file a document with the state, kind of saying, here's our stormwater issue, and to give them a plan for how to reduce it by a certain amount. And as part of that plan, there's a cost to that. Chester filed one of those plans even before the Stormwater Authority.
Absolutely.
And the cost of the improvements was around $1.25 million. Mm-hmm. It was $1 million up front, and then it was $20,000. I think it was around $1.2 million up front, and then about $20,000 a year going forward. What the Stormwater Authority spent was over $43 million over the years. Which is a huge amount, right? And ratepayers here know how much the rates went up.
Right.
The Stormwater Authority, and so that's a red flag for me, right? Again, not to say that it's not important to have stormwater improvements, right? There are capital needs. There's no question about that in the city. But if you look at kind of how much was done, and most of that money was borrowed, right? It was borrowed from a state agency. It wasn't just grants, about 33 millions of that. So most of your stormwater bill, if you're paying it, you should be paying it, by the way. If you're paying it, most of that is actually going to pay back those loans for work that's already been done. So that raises some red flags over here. Again, not to say it's not important, but to go from about 1.2 million, which is what you needed to comply with the law, to 43 million over a time period is astounding. Like that 43 million, that's like what a city of Philadelphia would invest in its stormwater infrastructure. It's not a community of like 35,000 people. So part of the other problem, right, with the Stormwater Authority was the governance structure. And again, I'm a lawyer. I've spent a lot of time looking at like how things get formed. I'm in the municipal law, and I have never seen anything like it, JP. Like from the start, I mean, they had a meeting that the mayor, then Mayor Kirkland, just showed up and appointed people. Like, you can't do that.
Why can't you do that?
Because it's against the law.
You can do that in the mafia. You can do that in your gang.
There's no legal ability to, like, you saw this and I was like, did they just appoint people?
Yes.
And this was actually even before the Stormwater Authority was incorporated.
Yes.
So, and then you said, you appeared to have something that may have, that then hired somebody and made a motion and then the back in October of 2016 the filing was actually done right, and all of this is governed under the Municipal Authorities Act. So that's something in Chester that's an important part that I think we have been trying to do, which is to to make sure that people follow the law. Like there are laws out there. There's rules out there. You've got to follow the rules. Like you got to pay your taxes. You got to pay your fees. You got to do all those things, right? But you also got to follow the Municipal Authorities Act, right? And the Municipal Authorities Act is very clear that board members of an authority do not get paid unless the municipality that incorporates them passes a resolution that sets the salaries. And that did not happen here.
So all they had to do was have a city council meeting and say, we're going to pay them $13,000 a year.
Correct.
And they will be able to sit on the council and still get paid.
Well, no. So that just sets the board members. What Chester has is under its home rule charter, which is kind of like its constitution, right? That's a really important legal document. What it says, as interpreted by the city attorney, is that city council elected officials, so city council members and the controller, cannot serve on paid boards while they are council members. Okay. And there's good reason for that, right? Because what'll happen sometimes is city council will appoint their own, and it's almost a way of getting a pay increase, right? And that's not permitted. You're not allowed to get a pay increase in the middle of the time. So a lot of issues on that, and we could spend a lot of time on that. But it's pretty well, it's documented. But you asked me the question about recoupment, right? Yes. About this, and so let me kind of tell you like how I'm thinking about this, right? It's this. It's prior. There's an argument out there, right, for people who were being paid on the Stormwater Authority board that they didn't know. Right. And it's possible they didn't. Right. Because, if you're appointed to a board, right, and you're getting a salary and you're the board member, right, you're a new board member. Right. You may look at this and say like, well, they're paying me. Right. Like without anyone saying anything ahead of time. Right. They may not have known. But in February of 2024, the receiver brought it to city council's attention and brought it to the board's attention. And the city solicitor in February of 2024 said to the council and sent a written email opinion that said that them staying on the board would have violated the home rule charter. And then all of those elected officials, they resigned, but then they stayed on the board. They submitted their resignations at the end of February, then they stayed on the board. And so I can understand, look, I can just say this. I can understand not necessarily knowing that city council didn't pass a resolution to set the board salaries before February of 2024. But after February of 2024, you knew, or you should have known, or you should have investigated it. And I don't know what lawyer out there told them that it was okay.
The solicitor.
No, not this solicitor, not Ken Schuster. I don't think he did.
Okay.
But someone else who, I don't know if they spoke with, or I don't know who that is, but I hope he's got good malpractice insurance, because there is no way you could read the Municipal Authorities Act to allow board members to be compensated. So, I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at over here, right? And in my role as a receiver, right? Again, I'm focused on the numbers. I'm also focused on the operations, but I'm also focused on trying to make clear to the public that everybody should be treated equally under the law, right? That's what's sort of in my mind right now about trying to determine whether or not, we the receiver seek recoupment. Under the law, any ratepayer could actually file something as well. Right. I think but it is, what's interesting about that whole situation in the Stormwater Authority is it puts together all of these like issues that are facing Chester, right? Absolutely. Right. Like companies doing work and on these things, and it's an issue, and people being appointed to boards and getting paid. And what's interesting is actually two of the founding members who are still on the board right now, the Stormwater Authority, are also the city's representatives to the Chester Water Authority. So you sort of want to talk about transparency, right? Like that's what's really important, I think, for the city of Chester is that type of transparency. And the final thing I'll kind of say on this, JP, is it's why folks like you in the community who are actually asking questions, right? And just asking questions, right? They can be hard questions, they can be pointed questions, but if you don't ask folks like me who are in power in questions, they're not going to answer them.
You'll do whatever you want.
I don't have to answer them, right? And so So I appreciate that, and that's what's exciting right now to see folks around the city doing that.
Yes,
and,
yes.
Well, I appreciate you, giving me the time here today.
Absolutely, no problem. Listen, I told you we could do 2 hours if you want. Right? It really doesn't matter to me because I spend more time talking about less important stuff than talking about the city of Chester, the things that we should do as a community, how we should come together, how we should stop fighting. But sometimes the fighting brings forth change. Yeah. Right. And solutions come out of that. Right. So,
well, and ultimately, I don't mean to cut you off on that, but that's, let me just say it this way. It's the right type of fight.
Absolutely.
Right. Because this city,
right. Good trouble.
As a personal, I'll share some personal stuff. Like this city has changed me since I got here. Right. I mean, I'll tell you straight, like when I first got here, I did things that most consultants would do, right? So I wrote my memos, right? I did my little charts, I did my little PowerPoints, right? And I thought that if I had the right argument, right, that people would listen and that it would change. And then what I started seeing were like bad contracts. And I started interacting with other people, right? And again, you saw a community that was sort of taken advantage of over and over and over again. And if that's the culture, right, of seeing of a place where people are just willing to come in and do whatever they want to a city, that's the kind of people you're going to attract as investors, right? And that's not the kind of people you want, right? And so what I actually had to realize was maybe you actually do have to fight. Right. And that as a person, and folks will, may laugh about that now because I have a short fuse. I try not to, but you can tell when I'm irritated.
People need to know that.
And it's okay. But to go to your point, we don't have to agree on everything. It's okay if we don't. If we respect each other, that's fine. But if someone is not telling you the truth, if someone is taking advantage of you, I have no issues throwing a punch, a metaphorical punch, right? Not a literal punch, right? Like I don't have an issue with that because sometimes that's what you need to do, especially in a situation like, because folks won't listen otherwise. It's why we are aggressive in our litigation. It's why we've been aggressive in some of the various cases that we've brought. And again, you can't. This is my philosophy. I'm just giving you my philosophy so folks get
from a lawyer's point of view. You're right, Ms. Zulene, right? I mean, you learn, and you said over the last 5 years since you've been in this city, it has taught you to handle things differently than how you started. Yeah. Right? And that's one thing about this city. It will give you heart. If you truly love this city, to be you have to have heart, right? You have to be able to stand up. You have to be able to fight. You have to be able to tell, hey, no, you're wrong, bro. Like, it doesn't work like that. Have a seat, right? And then you show them the information you have, and then they say, okay, maybe that might work, right? So,
and then the next time they'll come and shake your hand.
Right. And they definitely will come and shake your hand. Yeah. There's still a lack of transparency in city government. These are the people that are viewing on Facebook Live. I want to say thank you to everyone that's here. I have a question. Can you talk about how there were ghost employees found on the Parks and Recs payroll in 2023? How does that happen? And I want to say who was responsible for the oversight, but we already know who was, but not really. But who was responsible for the oversight?
Yeah, so let me first just kind of address that and just let you know, like that. I mean, how disappointing is that, right?
Terribly.
I mean, just as a community member, right? Because everybody knows each other in Chester, right? Like you're either kind of related or you know each other, right? And everybody knows that was wrong, right? I mean, you had checks over there that were signed over to somebody else, right? And who does that, right?
A thief.
Like who does that to their own community?
A thief.
At a pool, right? A pool is supposed to be a place where like the community comes together, right? And the idea that you would think that would be okay to do. I mean, you talk about like getting irritated and enraged, like that did it to us, right? Because not only is it like important because of the amount of money that was taken, right? Which was taken? I don't remember exactly, JP, so I don't want to give misinformation.
Ms. Zulene, if you know, put it in the comments.
But what's more important about that is the message that it sends, right? Because most of the press, and folks know this, most of the press, when they come to cover Chester, it's not good news.
It's not. It's
right?
never
It's
good
a crime
news.
issue. Yep. It's something there, and there's really good work that's happening in Chester, right? The folks in Chester don't ask. I mean, they're tough folks, but they don't get a lot of help from the outside.
No, they don't.
A lot of folks have been figuring out ways of doing this
ourselves.
on their own.
We got it.
Which has its benefits, but also has its problems, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, it's such a black eye on the city. And there was issues with gift cards that weren't found. There was just over and over and over again. And I think what I hear sometimes from the community is like they want accountability.
That's it.
Right. Because they don't want people to get away with things that aren't right.
No.
Because not only is it bad in and of itself, but it makes the city look bad, right?
It makes the city stink.
How do you explain this to the kids, right? To the next generation?
You don't. You
right?
move out of the city, you go somewhere else. But let me just say that administration, that whatever, that wasn't the first time those things happened. That was the first time somebody walked into a building and put ghost employees on paychecks and took the checks and moved. It was happening at the school district. That's why the school district is under receivership right now, right? So I know you don't really know the funds. Do y'all commingle the school district with the city?
No, completely
Not
separate.
at all, right? So you wouldn't really know. But if you just a while, just take some time to go over there and look at their books too, you'll see the same thing was happening. It's like, what the hell? Like, how you steal money from a community that you claim to love, and that means you don't really love it.
And it's not just that, but it's also, it's not just a focus on kind of cleaning those things up, right? But it's also on improving the operations. And folks may remember, again, this is what's sort of fascinating about Chester is I said before it was hard to get people to pay attention. Now people across the country nationally are watching what's happening in Chester. The law that's being made through Chester's bankruptcy is, I mean, it is going to be precedent, right? All across the country and even in the state. The matter that went up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the one about suspending council members' powers to run departments. Right. One of the things that I'm really focused on, and the mayor is, and city staff is as well, is improving the housing stock and improving the codes, right? Over 2/3 of the people in Chester live in rentals. And one of the things that we have to make sure of is that those rentals are up to code, right? Because we don't want people living in places that are fire traps or have mold or other things like that. And getting the right people into these positions, right? Getting the right leadership required us. That is why we fought as hard as we did in order to get in order to suspend the power of council members to serve as department heads, so we could put professionals in.
Yes.
And that, to me, I think that's really important, and that's something for the community. To the extent the community is looking at this. Right now, we have professional people in those positions because of the recovery plan. Once the recovery plan goes away, so once the receiver goes away, it goes back to the way it was before, unless you change your charter.
Right. Unless
the community decides to change the charter. And I know there was a movement, at least before, there were some folks working on some signatures. I don't think they got as many as they wanted. But if you're asking me long-term here, that is an area that is of prime importance, because you want professionals running this city. So you have the right people in these positions. And that is why, we fought as hard as we did in order to get, it wasn't about power, right? Like I don't get power from jobs. This is not how I work. Right. Which I think confuses some people because I think they're used to it a different way. But that is just I wanted to make sure, JP, that I touched on that, because absolutely. that is incredibly critical, because what that will also do is our current structure right now is encouraging people to come in who've got Chester like in their heart, right? Who care deeply about it, and who are working hard to they're not going to come to a community if they believe that like jobs are just going to people who are related to somebody else,
Right. Nepotism
that's right.
is a big thing, and I get it, right? For a while, my grandma always used to say, if you're not Republican, you can't get a job in the city of Chester. Right, so
she was right at one time.
She was not lying. You had to be Republican, right? And that machine did some things. It tore some grounds up, and I'm not blaming either side, right? I'm just saying let's move forward. What was wrong? We got to know what happened in the past so we know what not to do in the future.
True.
Right? So it's not to blame anybody. It's not to say it's your fault. It's just to say it happened under your watch, right? And you're responsible for it. So how can we change and make sure we don't repeat this action? And I get it. We live in a repetitive community, right? What we see is what we be. What we see is what we do. What we see is what we give, right? So we have to start seeing differently, looking under the rocks to find out how can we save our community. And in this, we have a receiver here, right?
Yeah.
Who has a recovery plan, right? And I want you to talk about that a little bit, the recovery plan, and what do you need from the community, right? The community's outpouring and services and the things that we do in our community. What do you need from us to make sure this recovery plan takes place?
Yeah, and JP, I just want to mention one quick thing, just one little interesting irony. So the book that talked a lot about the machine over history, and again, this is folks who may be interested in this, and it's called Ruling Suburbia, and it's a book about the machine that was really ran out of Delaware County, Ruling Suburbia. It's out of print, but I think you can get it on Google, and if folks if they're interested, drop a note in your comments, and we could work on it. But here's the interesting thing, right? So the guy who ran this, whose last name was McClure, he ran the machine. It was out of Chester, but it covered all of Delaware County. He ran it out of the Crozier building, right, the white building downtown Avenue of the States, out of the 8th floor. The irony of this is our offices, the receiver's office, are in the same building.
Right.
So we walk up the same stairs, right? That all of this at one time had been, had been sort of done that way, right? So it's like you said, it's like history. It's like it's
and if we don't know how to fix it, it's going to keep repeating itself with different people gaining different things. When the Stormwater Authority was announced, I said I don't blame Thaddeus for wanting to start a Stormwater Authority when you got the Chester Water Authority and you got Delcora being authorities. The Democrats deserve an authority too, but until they were in power, they couldn't do it. Right, so they did it. All right, you got the Stormwater Authority. Now, don't be taxing us a whole bunch of money, right? But what are you going to do to help the community and help the community be better? You're going to give jobs to people? Okay, awesome. You hired people. You gave people good jobs. That's cool. But let's make sure this is sustainable. Let's not make sure someone can attack it. So why not do everything the right way the first time so you don't got to go back and do it again another time, right? And then give to your community. Help your community. We got kids in this community, and I see them every day wanting to be better, but if they don't see better, they can't be better, right? So, the recovery plan. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So let me talk about kind of the way I'm doing this, and then you also talked about what helped for the community. So I am doing this. I'm both Michael and now me, we're doing this a little bit differently than most receivers. So when you think about a receiver, I talked about earlier, this is usually someone who comes in and just slashes and burns, right? What receivers also sometimes do is they say, here's the plan, right? They drop it down there and they say it's sort of my way or the highway, right? You kind of cram it down your throat. And there may be some of that we have to do at some point. But what we're trying to do right now, the way we're trying to do this is we're trying to set parameters. We're trying to say, look, there are different ways to solve this problem, right? The key things about this is that we got to solve the financial problem, not just for now, but also in the future. We got to have enough money. We got to provide an adequate level of vital and necessary services, really a dignified level, right? We can't just say we have a public works department that doesn't have enough equipment to do things. So we gotta make sure it's an adequate level. We got to make sure it's ongoing, right? We can't just do it now. We've got to do it in the future. We got to make sure that it's in the best interest of the residents, right? We don't want to like do something or bring something here that's going to hurt residents more, even though it may bring revenues in. So those are the kind of the parameters over there, right? Now within that, I am really open to what that may look like. Right now, we have to monetize the water assets, I think, because that's the only way we bring in enough money to address the revenue issues long term. So again, the city's tax base does not bring in enough tax revenue to support even like a basic level of operations. Right. It just doesn't. And we have the best financial team in PFM. They've crunched the numbers, and it just like you need an outside source of revenue. You just do. So within that, like we're kind of working forward on that. Now we got to reduce the costs of retiree healthcare and pensions. We got to do that. And that's, I know retirees don't want to hear that, but that is a very, very large part. And we also, I think, have to work on the basic operations, right? And this means like, improving processes in the codes department. This means improving scheduling, like in the public works department. It means getting better equipment. A lot of those things are investments. So those are that takes a longer route, right? I mean, if folks were to say to me, look, we want you to move fast. Like I bring up, Prospect Crozier Hospital, right? Mm-hmm. They move fast, right? But you saw the result of that. Right, a bankruptcy and shutting things down and walking out the door. That's not what we're doing over here. We're really trying to move forward. We're really trying to again, create the parameters and kind of work with the different groups to get there. Now, at the end of the day, like, might we have to cram things down or push? It's possible, right? I'd like to avoid that if we could, but that's entirely a possibility. So, there are, again, JP, there's different ways of getting there. But right now what I'm trying to do is set the parameters and kind of work forward on this. For the community, in terms of what the community can do, we're, let me say it this way, like on the receivers team, like we're people on the receivers team, right? We do this work, is the pay good? Yes, it absolutely is. But we do this work because we care about this community, right? And ultimately, like we want to go away, like we do. We want to be able to fix the problems, and we want to be able to hand this back to the community, the city back to the community. We truly do. And so, the first thing that I would ask the community to do, which is again part and parcel of what you're doing, what other folks are doing, is to pay attention, right? Is to get involved, right? The folks who post comments, the folks who go to council meetings, the folks who post comments on articles about the council meeting. Doing this type of work here, bringing people in, talking to people, that is so important. It's important for the community to know, to get information out, because I see many times like how information is used against people here, how people are told lies, and they believe them, right? Because in the past it's happened, right? And so that's very difficult for us. I mean, for the longest time, the CWA said that the receivers had a secret deal to privatize the water system. That is a lie, an absolute lie, right? But a lot of members of the community believe that, right? Because in the past, like there were deals behind closed doors, right? So paying attention and caring about this, it's not only important for the community, because again, this is your community, and it's going to be given to you as we kind of continue and go forward. And I think the other thing there too is it matters to us who are people who, who are people. And it's it's invigorating, right, to be able to talk to this is one of the best hours that I've spent, JP, is being able to talk with you and talk with members of the community who care about their city. And then more specifically, other things, I really do believe that a change in the Chester's charter is important long term. Again, that's up to the residents and up to the voters. That's not something that I can order.
How do you receive a change? How do you get to the point of changing the charter?
Well, either city council has to act to create to put it on the referendum, or if city council doesn't act, you can get a certain number of signatures that would force it to be on a referendum, and then people would vote. The residents would vote, and they would have to pass it.
Ms. Zulane mentioned something. We have too many businesses that are exempt from taxes. For the benefit of Chester, thinking about the businesses that we have along the 291 or the Delaware River, are they exempt from taxes? Who made them exempt from taxes? And is there a way we can go back and renegotiate those contracts?
Yeah, so I'll say a couple of things. So and I want to be clear about what some of those taxes may be. So for property taxes, if you are a nonprofit, so a university, a church, right, or nonprofit group, you don't pay real estate taxes. And so sometimes what will happen is you'll make a payment in lieu of taxes. It's called, basically, instead of paying taxes, they'll make a payment, right, called a pilot. I would say along 291, the other thing that's important too is you cannot, under the law, you can't tax entities at different amounts.
Right.
So you can't essentially use a different tax rate for one entity as opposed to the other, right? Okay. That's against the law, and that would be challenged pretty easily. So I do think, across the board, in terms of property taxes and otherwise, people are. I don't have any indication that some of those entities are not paying what they should be paying. Okay. That said, there are other opportunities, I think, to think about revenues across there, because again, this is like, we need everybody in order to get the community, back on its feet financially and going forward to help contribute. And so, if those are other opportunities for revenues, then that's something that clearly we're looking at. The thing for folks who are kind of saying, well, all right, why aren't you doing that now? Why aren't you doing that now? A lot of what we're trying to do right now is we can't do everything at once, right? And so what we were trying to work on is the things that have the biggest impact, right? Whether that would be monetization. Right now we're in the middle of bidding out our trash contract. There's other kind of very, what I will call things that are very, that either cost a lot of money or bring in a lot of revenues, right? And it's not to say that we don't think it's important. It's not to say we're not going to get there, but we've got to sort of pace ourselves, right, and focus on the things that bring in kind of the absolute most. Right. And again, it's an excellent question. It's a fair question. It's on our list, but again, we're trying to move in a. We're trying to do this in a, Michael always used to call it a methodical way, right? Mike was very kind of like step by step by step by step, and he's exactly right.
When we're talking about the home rule charter, right? You said that's more like the Constitution of the city, right? So Organize for Justice, if you want to come through here and we do a show and we try to figure out what changing the charter could do for our community and how it could help, and we just break it down, I don't have no problem with doing that. We can definitely do that. Do you believe that Chester can realistically get out of bankruptcy?
I do. I do. And I'm, that's a fair question, right? Right. That's a legitimate question for folks to ask, right? Because Chester's been under some type of state oversight since 1995 or 96. Right. And we can go into the reasons. We talked a little bit at the beginning about why it didn't fully come out of there. But JP, I'm actually excited. I'm excited about the city's future. And there's a couple of things about this that make me excited about it. One is the community, right? Again, we talked about this before. Like, folks here have had to survive, right? They have, right? And it's created, it's my feeling, folks, is that they work extremely hard. They care deeply about their city, right? And they're willing to do what it takes to help the city get out, right? They are. They just absolutely are. And you need that, right? Because a lot of communities have just given up. Like, I don't see Chester giving up. I can see Chester mad. I see Chester, frustrated. But I don't see Chester giving up, right? This is not a city of quitters. It's just not. And so just having that actually matters, right? Because if you've got that, you've got the will in a community to do what needs to get done. And you're starting to see that organization. Like, I'm starting to see that organization happen. Again, folks like you, other folks across the community who are willing to kind of step up. So I think, number one, that is possible. I think the stars are also aligning right in this bankruptcy. We can make the numbers work. JP, we can make the numbers work, right? It's going to require all these groups to come together, right, including the Water Authority, right? And I know I'm banging on these guys a lot today, but that matters, right? Remember, this system, the governance was taken from this community without so much as a dime, right? By Chester County, and at that time also by Delaware County, right? So both of those cases, right, without a dime, right? That wouldn't have happened to any other community. But I think not only we can make the numbers work, but right now we are making small steps. I think small improvements in City Hall and in city operations. And folks are now learning what it's like to, I think, run a city, right? It's hard enough to run a city now with the way just even with the economy and just the way cities operate. It's hard to do that. We talked a little bit about Chester situation, where a lot of our folks are doing work frankly, dealing with other people's problems, right? Like we're solving them, right? We're dealing with them, because we think it's important for the community. We're not happy about it. It's costing us money. It's preventing us from cleaning other things up, right? Because people aren't following the rules, right? Some of these folks aren't paying their full taxes. Some of these folks aren't paying fees. Some of these folks aren't maintaining their buildings. Some of these folks are dumping things illegally. Like those are sorts of things that again, we're going to make a real push on. And this is where I've become, kind of a hard ass on this. Like this is stuff that certainly we're going to push, and we're going to push hard. But JP, I really do think, I say that I would not have taken this position. I would not have stayed if I didn't think that Chester has an opportunity to do that. I'll tell you, this is by far the most difficult job I've ever had, but it's also the most humbling and the most meaningful. To meet folks here, folks will stop you on the street. They'll say hello. They'll call you out by name. You probably happens to you as well, right? Absolutely. Happens to other community leaders around here. They care about the community, and it's really an honor to be here. Right. It absolutely is.
No, thank you for coming through. My thing is just like, what's the end result, right? Yep. What do you want to see, the city of Chester? Where do you want to see us?
I want to see where ultimately, like if you take all the stuff, ultimately at the end, man,
without selling the water authority.
Well,
or privatizing.
Yeah. So so ultimately, I want a city that provides a dignified level of service to its community, so people can live their lives, so people can live their lives in a good way, right? This community deserves it just like every other community out there. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. If we can't monetize the water system, it's not going to be pretty. I can tell you that. But the reality is, I think right now, with all the parties around the table, if everybody's willing to give something, right? If everybody's willing to do that, I think we can get Chester out of bankruptcy. I think we can put it on solid financial footing. And the other thing that I know is really important to people in the community, and is important to me, is to make sure we got some processes, and we make sure we've got a structure so that it doesn't slip back. Right? Because the last thing any of us want to do is go through this process and do all the hard work that it takes to get to getting Chester back on its feet, and then 10, 15 years later, watch it all backslide. Because that's human nature, right? I've seen it happen in other work that I've done. But we got to make sure that doesn't happen here. Right.
If Chester meets all requirements and leaves receiverships, what safeguards will prevent falling back into crisis?
Great question. So one is, we first need to develop something on our way out, right? So that outlives receivership. And that's why bankruptcy is so important, because you can create a process, you can create an oversight board. All of that can be part of what's called the plan of adjustment. That's kind of like the recovery plan that a court will have to approve. And then there's basically a court-ordered mandate for people to follow it. Like, you got to follow it, right? And if you don't, you'll be in contempt of court. So I think first is kind of creating that type of situation, right. That type of process. The other thing is this is about, I think, educating the community, teaching people about what to expect from their government, right? It's having the media, right? And I include you in there, JP, mm-hmm. and others, right? Local Facebook, that information as well, holding people accountable to do that. And so, obviously we're not there yet, right? Let's get a plan first. Let's figure out a way forward first. But I can tell you, entities, groups that are involved in this, that has to be part of the discussion. Because if you're a retiree, right, and you're asking me to give up this, they want to know, well, if I give this up, how do I know you're not going to be back here in 10 years asking me for more? That's a legitimate question. Same thing with residents, right? If you're asking me to do this, how do I know in 10 years you're not going to come right back and do it, right?
Right.
And we don't want to, you know, we're putting in a lot of time, a lot of money is being spent here. That's not what I do. You know, if we look, JP, if we wanted to get out of here fast and just like have a nice little political win,
you would have been gone.
We would have let the city sign the asset purchase agreement with Aqua. We'd have fought in court. We'd have cut a bunch of things, and I'd have been out of here 3 years ago. Yeah. You know, and it would have left a lot of scars in the community. And I think the city would fall right back in this situation if we had done that, because you would have had a bunch of pot of money,
right,
and then people would just keep spending it.
And what do you have to say to the people that believe that, you know, the money that you've been paid is the reason why you're here, right? The $12 million or the however much money you've made since you've been here.
Yeah. So first off, I don't take that as an insult, because that's how it's been since. You know what I mean? Right. So like you said before, people latch on to like what's happened in the past, right? And I'm not saying the folks who came before us were like that, but it's not unusual. Like, I can believe, right? There were consultants that were here to be like, look, let me keep this going as long as I can go, right? Because it's like good money, and all I got to do is just like do some reports and whatever. I can tell you from a financial end, every one of those groups that's part of this team could be making more money elsewhere and would have an easier job, right? And again, I'm just going to say that, right? Like, and that's true. Every one of our groups is taking reduced rates. Again, we're being transparent about it. It would be nice to know if other groups out there are doing the same thing. And then finally, like, you all can like tell, I mean, the community can tell, you know, are we, you know, I mean, we're sitting kind of across the table, like the community's going to make its own decision.
Yes, they will.
Either they think they're going to believe me, or they may be lukewarm, maybe open, or they're going to be like, this guy's a liar, right? And they're not going to believe anything. And again, like I all I can do and all my team can do is do what we think is the right thing to do, that's in the best interest of Chester's residents. And like, you guys got a good BS detector, right? Like I think folks know when folks are lying, right?
It's hard to tell sometimes, right? Because it feels good, right? But after a while of hearing it, it's like, nah, you bullshit.
No, but then they do something, right? But but a person like that will do something, right? Like they'll slip up somehow, right?
Somehow,
right?
Some way,
like they won't show their contract, right? Or they'll like, you know, they won't come to a public meeting, or they'll catch a hot mic, right? They'll say something over there, and I don't think, you know, and we haven't, right? And again, we have to earn the trust of Chester residents. I think Mike did mostly.
Yes, he did.
You know, I got to do the same, and I understand that. And again, we're going to do our absolute best on behalf of Chester residents.
Are there any plans to attract new businesses or industry to increase Chester's tax base without displacing current residents?
So here's kind of, I think that question goes to like economic development, right? And the impact on the community. My philosophy on economic development here in terms of attracting businesses is, I don't necessarily believe in these like one shot, moonshot, bring somebody in here, create a whole new industry, and that'll bring a bunch of bring an enormous tax base in. That is not going to solve our financial problems. It's not. What we need to do is over time grow the tax base. That's true. And so my philosophy here is that, and I think this benefits everybody, is that we need to improve the living conditions for everybody in Chester. Improve public safety, right? Improve codes, improve housing, reduce illegal dumping, right? Reduce weeds. All those sorts of things are going to increase the value of the community. What it's also important to do, it's also going to make people's lives better, right? Can you imagine like a kid walking down the street every day seeing the same burnt out building? Right. What does that say to the kid, right, about the community, about
he shouldn't care,
about their worth, right, about their own worth?
He shouldn't care. No one will ever care about him, so he shouldn't really go to school and pay attention, because who's going to care if he doesn't pay attention? So he should come out into the community. He should poison his community. He should hurt his community. He should hurt the women. He should disrespect the children, and then the next generation sees him do the same thing, and so on and so on and so forth. And now we're where we are now, where we have 13 and 14-year-old kids running around with guns because they don't love themselves, because no one ever told them the importance of loving themselves, because they didn't see it in the parent before them or the person in their community. And that's why I push it the way I push it. right? I figured out I don't have a problem with laughing. I have a duality. I can laugh, I can joke, I can with the best stuff, right? But at the center of me is about showing children that they can be more than what they see, right? That you can want imagination. Remember Muppet Babies back in the day, the cartoon, right? I want you to dream like that, right? Get inside of a box. Kids don't play with boxes no more, right? Get inside of a box and think it's whatever ship you want it to be and let it take you to where you want to go. But that's the problem, right? It's not, we're not doing that anymore. So, you know.
But at the same time, I mean, but it goes to your question, right? And it's a really good question, right? Because people are worried because they are worried about gentrification, right? They're worried about displacement, and why I think the approach that we're taking right now. And again, other people are like, hey, what's your large economic development plan? Right. I have a very hard time believing that we're going to see large scale investment in this community without improving all those other things, right? I just don't like you're not necessarily going to come to a community and who would, again, there's some folks that are out there that are doing that. And I think it's fantastic. Like you are seeing development across the city. You are seeing people's houses, being improved. You are seeing some housing being built around the city. But I think kind of long term, it's about improving, the quality of life for everybody. In some ways it is about respect. And I think through that type of respect, you're going to see economic development happen. But that's sort of my philosophy. That's again why I am absolutely so focused on codes. Ms. Nona Watson, who's the new director of economic development for the city, who's been here for a couple of months, her team, I think is doing a fantastic job. They got a huge issue in front of them, but I think they're doing their absolute best on that. As is everybody else across the city. But that's JP, that's my thought on that, right? That's my philosophy on that. So, and I'll tell people as well, like, even if you bring in a large business, again, which would be great, that's not gonna fix the hole that we're in. So if people are saying, well, I don't hear them, who have you brought in? My view is that folks will start to come in once they start to see, the improvements in city services, but also once I think some of the perception of the city changes as well, right? Because you hit your head on. You talked about this before, right? Prior to there has been a perception, right, of Chester being a place where only insiders, can get ahead, and that's going to attract a certain type of person. Right, a certain type of business. Those aren't the kind of businesses you want long term, right? It's not, right? It's not. So we got to change that culture there. We got to be clear about what the rules are. We got to enforce the rules across the board, and I think you're going to start to see that grow. And as it grows slowly, what'll happen is I think you'll see the benefit of that to the community across the board. The gentrification often happens when things happen very quickly. I don't necessarily see that in the city of Chester. Our ultimate idea, JP, in terms of like the financial things, is we want to make sure we have enough of a revenue stream that comes in over decades, so that the tax base grows, so that at the end of that period, the tax base is actually able to support the operations. Absolutely. It's a decade-long process. Doesn't mean there's going to be a receiver here for decades. I want to be clear. Not going to be here for decades. But that's the take. That's at least our philosophy.
We never lied, bro. Yeah. Oh man, it gets hard sometimes, right? When you start something, and you try to give people the facts. Yeah. And they don't necessarily want to hear the facts because it goes against what they believe. Right. This city has been ran into the ground by the people in control for the last 50 odd years, right? Sucked dry to give other municipalities, I'm not going to say other counties because we're in Delaware County, but it has basically fueled every municipality surrounding it, right? From Ridley to Eddystone to different areas. And that hasn't really benefited the people of Chester, right? Mm-hmm. Then the people of Chester, then we began to turn on each other and we fight and we argue and we scream and we holler and it's confusion for the children, right? Yeah. And when I tell you this all the time, sometimes I'm looked at as the bad guy because I don't want to fight, I don't want to fuss, right? So we have people on the comments currently right now, and it's starting to be that same energy, that fussing, that fighting energy. I do not know you personally, but I know you to be a man of your word, to help our community figure out how to get the money and keep the money and see the money long term. You've been here for 5 years.
Yep.
We haven't had conversations every day, but when we have had a conversation, it has been a very good conversation. I know you. So I'm telling people, if I trust him, you should trust him, right? It's not about, if you don't know him, then you say you don't know him. But, and Abdul Wakil, I'm going to call you after this because what you're saying on here is really like, if you do not know someone and you want to know them, you reach out to them and talk to them. You don't have a mindset of thinking that you know who he is or what he looks like or what he's doing, and he's not doing that. He's here to help the community, right? And the people that were in positions before, the people that you smiled, the people that you talked to, the people whose hands you shook, the people who lied and stole $100,000 ghost checking people that weren't even at work. Those are the people that you walk up to and you shake their hands and you act like you know them. So if that's how you know people, then I don't want to know the people that you know. And I would rather know the people that you don't know. We don't need colonizers. You don't. CMPradio.net, man. This is Uncle P, man. I'd like to thank our guest, the city receiver, for coming through here and talking to us and telling us what's on his agenda for the next couple years. Anything you want to say before we get up out of here?
And look, I JP, I certainly appreciate it here. It's the opportunity here for me is important. I mean, this is, as I said to you before, one of the most meaningful. This is the most difficult and most meaningful job that I've ever had.
Right.
Meeting folks and talking to folks in Chester. I understand people have every right to be skeptical about me, and that's fine. I believe me. I've been an elected official before. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to get to see my name in Facebook. But ultimately, where I want to leave people with is I do see a future here for Chester. I see a very bright future here for Chester. I feel like we're sort of turning the corner here in Chester, and I really mean that. I think we see that in terms of the community members who are getting involved, who are getting excited, who see an opportunity to get involved. I see that in the staff we have in City Hall. I see that in members of our team, and it's an honor, and I really do appreciate the opportunity. And again, I thank you for the work you're doing in the community and bringing information out to folks. And so, thank you, JP. Happy to come back anytime you want me.
Yeah, man. Anytime you want to come back, man, you are free to come back. I think the MFRAC meetings is something that the radio station needs to get in on, right? So if I got to give you access to the page, you can share it there. I just think just putting it in different locations will allow people to see things differently. I don't want to be in the MFRAC meeting because I don't know what y'all talking about, right? I have trouble, keeping my personal finances together. I can only imagine what would happen if I was put in charge of a big situation or had any input towards that, right? I don't know. But what I do know is people, right? And I appreciate you. I know you truly care about the city, and you just want to hold people accountable that are putting extra money in their pocket or throwing money away. You can throw away if you went to McDonald's real quick and ordered a number 3, whatever a number 3 is, and you saw the bag and it was full of money, you said, I don't want that, you threw it in the trash. Would that make you irresponsible? Do you think that would make you irresponsible or stupid? Answer that question for me real quick. Just put up the word that is it irresponsible or stupid to throw money away? So if you don't know.
I would say irresponsible. In my mind, it's irresponsible.
Yeah, I would just call them stupid because it's money. Yeah. Why would you throw money in the trash can? Anyway, CMPradio.net. This has been the Cultivating Mature Positivity podcast. I want to thank our guest, Vijay. I was about to call you doctor. Vijay Kapoor, man. Thank you. I appreciate you, man. Any way we can do this again, I'm here, right? Maybe we could do it once every 3 months, right? So I'll see you again. What's this? This is August. I'll see you in November.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Once every 3 months we will do this. And listen, I don't have to be the person holding the interview. This is a radio station. I'm kind of tired of doing all the talking, right? I got to go behind the wall and get the business done. But if you want to hold a podcast, if you want to talk to the people in your community, come to the radio station, bro. Like, yeah, that's how we do things, man. CMPradio.net, man. It's your boy Uncle P, and I want y'all to have a great day. On purpose, understand, right? Without seeing, you can't be. Without doing, you can't do. If that makes sense. It kind of made sense when I was thinking about it. I don't think it really made sense. But anyway, CMPradio.net, man. I'm out of here. Peace.